Firearms are loud enough to damage a person's hearing in a short period of time. Some people believe that shooting small, low-powered rifles without hearing protection is safe, but this is a mistake that can cause partial hearing loss. Although it is easy to prevent, hearing loss is one of the most common injuries associated with firearms use. If a person believes that they are becoming accustomed to loud noise, they are actually going deaf. A hunting rifle can be from 150 to 170 decibels and will cause hearing loss if hearing protection is not worn. A suppressor can lower firearm muzzle blast noise by about 30 decibels. This is a 1,000-fold reduction in noise intensity or an 8 times decrease in loudness. A suppressor cannot make a firearm completely silent. Even a small rimfire rifle is at least 110 decibels when equipped with a suppressor. The noise and recoil reduction provided by a suppressor is a valuable training aid for new shooters. Suppressors also greatly reduce sound levels near shooting areas. This is important as homes and businesses encroach upon formerly remote shooting areas. A hunting rifle can be as loud as 170 decibels. OSHA recommends hearing protection for continuous noise levels of 84 decibels and higher. Some firearm experts recommend hearing protection for short-duration impulse noise of 140 decibels or greater. Using a suppressor protects the hearing of anyone nearby. Minnesota law defines a suppressor as a device designed to silence or muffle the report of a firearm. Civilian possession of a suppressor in Minnesota is a felony. Suppressors and firearms capable of being equipped with suppressors are also prohibited while hunting. The police are allowed to use suppressors for tactical emergency response operations only. Some states that prohibit civilian suppressors possession make an exception for licensed dealers, but Minnesota statutes do not. This forces the police to obtain suppressors from out-of-state sources. Certain members of the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources were allowed to use suppressors for wildlife control operations, but this provision expired on July 1, 2011. Suppressors are legal to own in the USA, although 12 states, including Minnesota, prohibit their possession by civilians. Missouri and Kansas most recently amended their laws to allow civilian ownership. Washington State amended their code to allow the use of registered suppressors. Most states require that suppressors be registered with the federal government to own them. Federal law requires that individuals or businesses obtain ATF authorization prior to making or purchasing a suppressor. All legally possessed suppressors are registered with the ATF, even those owned by state and federal government agencies. Any person who buys a suppressor must pay a $200 tax and pass a background check. Many people mistakenly believe that suppressors are illegal due to some sort of crime problem associated with their use. The reality is that suppressors are legal to own in the United States and are rarely associated with violent crime. There are severe penalties for criminal misuse of suppressors or simply evading the transfer tax. Use of a suppressor in a violent crime can result in prison terms of 20 years to life and fines of up to $250,000. Simply failing to pay the $200 tax can result in a 10-year prison term as well as a $10,000 fine. Americans who go to the time and expense to own a suppressor rarely ever misuse them. Criminal misuse of suppressors is also rare in Minnesota. The Bureau of Criminal Apprehension does not track crimes associated with illegal suppressors, but other sources indicate that forfeiture of illegal suppressors is rare in Minnesota. Suppressors are typically depicted by the media as tools of the police and military or misused by criminals. But in reality, suppressors have been marketed to the general public for over 100 years. Maxim marketed his suppressors to sportsmen and encouraged their use as training aids for novice shooters. In 1934, a $200 tax and other strict controls were placed on suppressors. Few people were willing to pay so much for a small muffler that might only cost $5. The $200 tax back in 1934 is equivalent to over $3,000 today. Inflation has greatly reduced the impact of paying the $200 tax for suppressors and certain other firearms controlled by the federal government. As a result, many more people purchase them today for use on sporting firearms. Suppressor possession is very strictly controlled by the federal government. Anyone that wishes to own a suppressor must submit a tax stamp application called the ATF Form 4 to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Prior to submitting the application, the applicant must obtain the signature of their local sheriff on the back of the form. The application is sent into the ATF along with Form 5330.20 attesting to legal residence. the applicant's photos, fingerprints, and a check for $200. After an FBI background check is performed, the application is approved in about 3 to 6 months. Only after the ATF approves the application can the buyer take possession of the suppressor. There are some concerns that allowing civilian suppressor ownership can lead to increased poaching of game animals. Suppressors are currently readily available to any poacher that wants one, but poachers are criminals that do not respect the law or the wildlife they hunt. Poaching in Minnesota is a gross misdemeanor which can result in a 1-year prison term and a $3,000 fine. This is less than the 5-year prison term and $10,000 fine imposed for suppressor possession, but the civil penalties for poaching can be much worse. They include forfeiture of game, vehicles, firearms, and other equipment used by the poacher. Compared to the severe penalties for poaching, the penalties for suppressor possession are not likely to inhibit their criminal use by poachers. Eliminating the penalties for possession of registered suppressors is not likely to encourage poaching. This is a small pump-action .22 caliber rimfire rifle. It is suitable for small game. Noise is greatly reduced by a small, cheap suppressor, but it is far from silent when used with hunting ammunition. The muzzle blast and bullet flight noise is easily heard from 50 yards away. This is a bolt-action rifle chambered in 17 rimfire Magnum. It is suitable for small game, but it is also not silent when used with a suppressor. The muzzle blast is even louder than the .22 caliber rifle. This is a high-powered rifle chambered in .308 Winchester. It is suitable for large game including elk and black bear. It is approximately 135 decibels even though it has a large suppressor attached. It is shown here from 100 yards away, but is readily heard from several hundred yards even when used with a high-quality suppressor. Even though sound levels are greatly reduced, poachers cannot rely upon a suppressor to eliminate noise when they are illegally taking wild game. Amending the statute will bring Minnesota law in line with federal law. Federally licensed firearm dealers will be allowed to sell suppressors to the police and individuals by obtaining the authorization of the ATF. Small businesses will benefit when allowed to sell these expensive firearm accessories. It will also eliminate the red tape required for their possession and use by the Minnesota police and restore the DNR's ability to use them for wildlife control operations. Suppressor use greatly enhances the shooting experience and makes firearms safer to use. Thank you.